to a gentleman who's been very active on this issue, Mr. Welch of Vermont.
Thank you, Mr.
Gentleman
Chair.
from Vermont is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, with all the back and forth, what we really have before us is two problems facing America. One is too few jobs. 9.8% of Americans who want work are out of work. 15 million people, millions more so discouraged that they are the underemployed. We have got to find a way to put them back to work. The second problem we have is too much debt. And without going into the history of how we went from a record surplus to a record deficit, we went from the Clinton tax rates to the Bush tax rates, from that surplus of 20 million jobs created to 8 million jobs lost. We have a debt now that is approaching $14 trillion, and with the passage of this bill, will be approaching $15 trillion. And the question for us, to the American people, is if we are going to borrow a dollar, for any reason, will there be a job bank for that dollar borrowed? That dollar borrowed is coming from China. And what this legislation will do is literally ask the American middle class to borrow $200 billion to pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest families. This is not an objection to people being wealthy, has been said. They can be generous and they can create jobs. It's about whether that job borrowed will produce, that dollar borrowed will produce a job for an out-of-work American, and it won't. So there are other alternatives to what is before us. We should not be borrowing money that won't be productive. What we should do is a very simple alternative that isn't even considered. We can extend the middle-class tax cuts as President Obama wants to, but stop it at $250,000. Invest the savings in deficit reduction and half in infrastructure development. We can, as Mr. Frank said, provide a $250 one-time payment to the folks on Social Security who haven't had a COLA increase in 2 years. We can have a piece of legislation that will borrow less, reduce the deficit, and create more jobs. Our responsibility fundamentally is to the American middle class, and one of the reasons they so fear this debt is because they know at the end of the day, they will have to repay it. Their sons, their daughters. The bondholders will be okay, but the middle class will pay. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has